Hi, good afternoon, everybody. They tell me this is the toughest shift, right after lunch, and everyone's a little bit tired. So I hope I can keep you entertained for the next half an hour or so. My name is David Keane. I'm the co-founder and head of DevOps at a firm called Calitii. I don't expect any of you to have heard of that because we just formed it 3 weeks ago, and this is our first gig. Many of the people that joined that company were part of this journey with me over the last 10 years at HSBC. And it's that transformation journey that I want to spend most of today talking about. So, as Pinyo was saying, a very large DevOps transformation. HSBC is the largest bank in Europe, and we've no way of knowing this, but we think that it was, it's the largest DevOps transformation ever undertaken. I'm going to talk about it. I'll be opinionated, and I'll say the things that we discovered. It's not that I'm saying that it's a perfect transformation. It certainly wasn't. Or these are the rules to be followed. I'll tell you what worked for us. I'll tell you what didn't work so well for us. And if some of that is useful to you guys at the end of the half an hour, then I've done my job. I wanted to spend a minute on the why of transformation before I get into it. And one of the reasons is that I'm often amazed that that's such a hard question for people to answer in a company or an enterprise, or it's such an inconsistent answer. And so the reasons why we did the transformation at HSBC are the ones that are written here. And it's probably in this order of importance that we took them, at least to begin with. We've had lots of talk, and I've been sitting here listening to all of the speakers so far, and found myself nodding along to lots of their experiences and recognizing what they were talking about. But the one thing no one's really talked about so far is cost and money, right? Not so much. But we would never have been given permission to do the things that we had to do, to spend some of the money that we had to do, unless we had a good story to tell about cost and cost reduction. So, like it or loathe it, being cost effective and cost efficient is a huge part of the argument. Also, and people understood this in the business side, we want to be able to support a more agile business. In banking, we had lots of challenger banks, and when they compare to the more established ones, they're able to move a lot faster. So we have to try and keep up with them. And a kind of a secondary point on that, we didn't think about so much at the start, but when Log4j came around, this is so evident that not just the ability to deliver functionality quickly to your customer, but be able to react quickly to cyber threats or any other threat that might come. And we were. You're never finished your transformation. So if I say halfway through our transformation, you'll forgive me, right? But the teams that were mature and that were along the journey were so much more able and so much quicker to respond to those kinds of threats than those that weren't. It was really, really marked. And the last one here is about reducing toil and bureaucracy and making a day in the life of the engineer better. Now, all the people that we had to take this to the board, of course, they're all normal human beings, and they wanted the day in the life to be better. But did that really change the dial for any of them? No, we weren't going to get permission based on that. But it actually turned out to be one of the most important things that we did. To bring a large enterprise with you, you have to bring the masses with you. And unless you're doing something that is feeding those people individually, why is my day better today? The transformation isn't going to succeed. At least that was my view. Can I ask for a show of hands here? How many people have heard of HSBC? Okay, so most people. So I don't have to go into too much detail. It's a big old bank, right? It's 160 years old. We've had an IT department since there was IT. The numbers are large, and the numbers I quote are going to sound very large, but there's 250,000 people roughly employed in the bank. There's 50 countries in the world with less number of citizens than HSBC has staff, to give you some context. We're in about 70 countries, which means it's regulated in 70 countries. And there's about 50,000 people in technology. So the reasons why I wanted to kind of emphasize that to begin with is that it's a place that's deeply conservative, really, and you kind of want your banks to be conservative, I suppose, because they're looking after your cash. But to transform is to change, and you know, it's not an easy thing to change a place that's as conservative and you know, as staid as HSBC was. You know, given the choice between change and status quo, they choose status quo every time. So when you're trying to persuade them to change and transform, you have to have a very compelling story. And I look back on the journey that we went on. This wasn't the plan sort of that we began with. This is more how events unfolded for us. So we started small with a small group of innovators, and I'll tell their story in a little bit more detail in a second. But what we learned there is you can make huge differences locally if the team is motivated, if they put into practice all the good things you read about what you need to do for DevOps, for Agile. But what you can't do, certainly in a large organization with different silos and different structures and permissions and responsibilities divided between them, you can't really change it for the masses. You know, you have to do something beyond that. And one of the challenges the group, that innovating group, had initially was the change management policy in the bank release strategy, which was very structured, and it was the same for everybody. And so we had to move to finding a different way, a better way to do change management. And just to give you a sense of what it was, we used to have a process where if you raised a change ticket, you weren't allowed to actually do that production release until 7 days later. And those 7 days in the middle were about checking manually, typically, that it was okay. Cab meetings where people would turn up who generally knew very little about the change, but they were senior and they could persuade people to push differences through. I have to say, my own journey, you know, I'd worked in development spaces, but I'd more recently worked in an operations space before I came into the role leading the DevOps transformation. And the idea that increasing your release frequency was going to improve your incidence or improve your health wasn't one that came naturally to me. But it's one that we proved through the innovator's case. When we moved beyond a small number of teams, you know, we quickly recognized you have to have a relatively simple way to communicate and to measure what you're trying to achieve. You get what you measure. There's been a number of conversations about DORA metrics, and I'll talk about what we did with those in the bank. But when you're trying to make an enterprise-wide change and you want to explain to people what the outcomes are, keeping it simple and getting agreement to what those things are at the outset was crucially important. They're proved crucially important for us. The OKRs are important too, because we wanted people to be ambitious rather than just doing what was comfortable, right? And the next thing was about IT controls. I could have talked about a number of different things, but I've chosen IT controls. This is how we serve the engineers. You know, in a heavily regulated industry, as banking is, we often heard back from the engineering community that they couldn't do things, they couldn't be DevOps, they couldn't be Agile, and the reason why was because of the controls. So addressing those and making those a key aspect of what we delivered from the center was incredibly important. And then doing it at scale, right? I'll tell that story as we go along. So we started with a small team that were looking after a product that did foreign exchange. It's foreign exchange for corporate, so it's not like me coming here and changing my £100 sterling into Swedish krona. This is dealing with billions of dollars, and the group that we're looking after was probably 100 people working, 100 technologists working on this platform, and we had two ingredients to what helped us here. One was that about a half a dozen people had joined, really top technologists with ambition, had joined this team sort of through 2013 to 2014. And they were used to working in a different way. And they wanted to bring that way of working to the bank. And the second thing we had was a disaster. And that was really useful because at that time there was a very bad relationship, I say a normal relationship, but not a great one, between the business customer and the technology staff, where the businesses demanded lots and expected very little from their IT department, and there wasn't a lot of empathy back and forth between the two parts of the organization. And I think that if this disaster hadn't happened, it may have just remained like that. And so when I say disaster, if this system had been out for an hour or 2 hours, then I think the heads might have rolled, but the way of working wouldn't have changed. But actually the system was down for 2 days, and that had never happened before. And I think it was so serious that, that the business realized we can't just continue the way that we've always done business. So I'm not suggesting that you adopt a disaster or you make a disaster happen, but if one happens, do take advantage of it. So they sat down with the technology team and they said, look, what do we want to do differently? And they talked about a bunch of different things. There's a few things that they landed on that they stuck with. And one of them was that they decided they needed to be able to release more frequently. Right? At that time, they were doing about 1 release a month. And they said, look, what we need to be able to do is to bring that down to every 2 weeks, and then eventually a week, and so on and so forth. And everyone thought that would be impossible. Right? How are we going to do that? And they started thinking of all the things they had to try and do. And the other thing was the business came into the room. And so instead of being there at the start of the year with a big long list of things that they wanted to do, and at the end of the year to give out to you, they were in the room all the time. So they gave the time to become true product owners of what they were doing. So those were the two things that this group started with. This graph is very important for me because, as I said, I'm not sure what the worst day of my working career was, but I'm pretty sure it was a Monday. And why is that? Because all your releases used to go in over the weekend, and on Monday they'd fail, and it would be painful. And so when we started this journey, said we have to release more frequently. I had to go on that convincing journey myself. And so the blue line you see is just a raw number of changes that group did over a 2 or 3 year period. And the red line is the number of incidents that they had. So for most of my career, all of my career up to that point, I had seen a very tight correlation between instant change. If one went up, the other one went up. But if you do all of the small things, and we've heard about them in the other meetings today, if you do the automation, if you have the product ownership, if you cross-train your team, if you do all of these things right, you can improve your quality. And so that circle there is incredibly important because this is where we saw the breaking of that correlation. All of a sudden, we were able to go faster and to break less. And so that proved the point to us. And on the right-hand side, you can see the positive jaws. So in banking and finance, you talk about negative jaws when you're losing money, and positive jaws when your income is above your expenses. We were seeing positive jaws, probably the first time in my career. So the faster we were going, the better our stability was getting. So we were able to prove to ourselves and to our business counterparts that if you go faster, you will break less. And around the same time, we got a couple of other apps trying to do the same thing. It's still very small, right? And this is a study I did a couple of years, maybe 2015, 2016, which was around the makeup of the work. So the app 1 on the left-hand side, it had some problems. They're quite similar, the two applications that are here. They probably had 100 people working on them. They were serving thousands of customers. One was a fixed income product. The other one was a foreign exchange product. But lots of similarities. On the left-hand side, we took a very traditional approach with the service improvement program. And the target of that was to reduce the number of incidents by about 25%. What I'm showing in the graph here, you can see, is the different service tickets. And I've shown them as a percentage of the overall. So the red line, about 80% of those tickets were incidents, and about 20% were service requests. And you can hardly see the change line. And that's what I'm showing as a percentage of the overall month's work. So as we did that service improvement program, it actually did hit its target. About month 5, we reduced the incidents by 25%, and it was deemed a success. But as you can see, it didn't have any impact at all on the makeup of the work. On the right-hand side, another application, similar size, similar complexity, but we took a very different approach. We said, okay, you guys have got to go faster and break less. We'll take a very much of a DevOps approach to doing this. And what you'll see is quite quickly, the makeup of the work changed. Right? Now, this might be an extreme example, but we saw this maybe in a more gentle version of this with every single other application that we took through the process. And what that meant, you can imagine if you're looking at your budget for this at the start of the year, you're spending if you're spending $1 million on your IT for the application on the left-hand side application, most of that money is being spent on servicing the application, keeping it live, dealing with service requests. On the right-hand side, at the end of the year, you're actually spending the vast amount of your time and money based on tickets, which is not an exact science, on moving new code into production. And so as a business, you can make a decision. Do I want to take some money off the table here and have, do the same with less? Or do I want to proceed and have a competitive advantage by pushing out way more change? Why does that happen? Well, you build it, you run it, culture takes an effect. But if you have a system that's doing a release on a daily basis as opposed to a monthly basis, all the service requests and other things that you used to get, which essentially were a symptom of functionality that didn't exist, can be taken care of. And they are taken care of. And the things that are important are taken care of. And so now we knew we could go faster, we could break less, and we could change the makeup of the work. So before we took it much further onto a broader scale, we really wanted to have a common way of describing what we were doing that everyone could get around. So what you see here largely is the DORA metrics. It's our version of it, what we were able to do to approximate to it. So it's not exactly the same. There's a few points I want to call out here. The first one, release frequency. We came up with a different way of doing that. It's still release frequency, but we measured it for a notional team of 10 per year. And the reason that we did that was twofold. Budgets go up and budgets go down, right? And no 2 years are the same. So we wanted to be able to judge what a nominal team of 10 would do, so we could compare years and people and the rest of it. And the second thing we wanted people to compare themselves to themselves and not to others. So if you're dealing with a legacy system and it's not as easy to get faster as a brand new greenfield site, your job is to improve your PDY against what it was last year. It's not to compete with the next team over, but it is still an intention that you have to get better. Incidents, I think, are self-explanatory. Lead time to deploy, as we became more mature, became useful, but it took a number of years. And change failure rate, I have to say, we never really had the maturity for that to be that helpful a metric for us. It was more useful for catching anomalies or things that were strange. The right-hand side, getting the metrics is one thing, agreeing them, and it was quite a feat to do that. Making them automatically available and making them easily available and transparent so everyone can use them was also incredibly important. We didn't want spreadsheets, we didn't want arguments over what the numbers were and the rest of it. So we built a system, and from a single team all the way up to enterprise, you could tell what the PDTY was of any team. And pretty soon it became the currency that everyone spoke in. But making it available, making it highly transparent was really important. So having had some success with a small number of teams, we decided to do this for the entire investment bank. So the investment bank in HSBC, it's about 6,000 people in IT, it's about 1,000 applications. So we're not going to be able to give the same sort of concentration to each of those. You can't do that in the same way. So having those metrics in place and a understanding of what's expected of people was really, really key. And so leadership was a real game changer. And the first year we tried this, the leadership was nervous, right? And they said, okay, we'll increase by 10%, we'll get a little bit better, but there really wasn't buy-in to it. But the second year, we persuaded the CIO for the investment bank to not just say you have to go faster and break less, make it ambitious. You have to double your releases and half your number of incidents, which of course everybody thought was impossible, and it was impossible, right? But it was an OKR, it wasn't a target. But what it meant was that people had to think about, what are the big problems? What do I need to re-architect? Is there something I need to? This is going to be multi-year. If you give people a target of improving by 10%, what we found was if you're doing one release every month, you can cheat your way to 13, or 12. One release every month. You can cheat your way to 13 a year, or work a little bit harder. You're not changing the dynamic. So to force that, we had to make people ambitious where they weren't naturally ambitious. It was an OKR. which was super important. We weren't telling people what they do. We were setting an expectation with them. But we were also allowing them to make decisions within their own area. We didn't say all of your systems have got to double in half. But what we said is, if you have 100 systems, we want to see that averaging out over the whole lot. You can leave some of them if you're going to retire them. Don't worry about them. They can die. Others, there might be too high a risk. But there's another set that are new. They might have to quadruple rather than double or tenfold, right? And in year one, that helped people get on board with it. By year 3 or year 4, that had actually changed the culture in the team, because the IT leadership and the business leadership were now used to being able to get change frequently from most of their applications. So they no longer were patient to think, okay, there's an exception there. So the teams and the culture changed as a consequence of that. So having had some success with the investment bank. Sorry, I'll just talk about the graph for a second. You can see the positive jaws on the right-hand side. The same sort of approach has led to the same results. So now we're, if you like, more confident that our focus on go faster and break less is having an impact. And just to sort of put it in some numbers, I think when we started with the investment bank, there was the production deployments for a notional team of 10 was about 60, and today it's 600. So they haven't doubled and halved all the time, but they've done about 30 or 40% each year on year. And instances have fallen about 20% year on year. So when we'd had some success with that, with the investment bank, and we took a rest, we then decided to do it with the entire enterprise. And HSBC is big, right? So you've got 50,000 people in technology, you've got 8,500 applications. And we went through a similar startup phase with the leadership group that looks after technology for the entire bank. There was lots of reasons why we couldn't do it in different places. We're not the investment bank, so we don't have the same risk appetite. My business aren't interested in it, or it's a Monday, I don't really want to do it. There was lots and lots of pushback, but we had the external information we got from the DevOps reports and some external people who'd come in to work with us, with our business and IT. But we'd also proved it internally with all the headwinds that exist in HSBC. So we were able to push ahead with it. Now, in the first year, it was very similar to the first year in the investment bank. The CIOs of the different departments were unwilling to sign up to an ambitious OKR. So guess what? They signed up to a 10% target. So we'll increase our release frequency by 10% and we'll decrease our instance by 10%. Now, I don't want to shock you, but there was some cheating that went on. And that had happened at earlier stages of the exercise too. So we did a couple of things, right? One was we made very visible the scores. We made them available to people through a system, but we actually started getting A3 sizes of pieces of paper, and in every room, every building where we had IT staff, every month we would put up a graph that showed the release frequency and the instant numbers for every department. And so when I'd come in on a Monday or Tuesday, I'd see people standing around these and looking at them and always saying, they didn't agree, they were arguing. But I knew we were winning because we had their attention. The other thing that we did was, we got the communication around going faster and breaking less had become embedded, and we had a communication strategy that went out with that. And we wrote down for first time what we meant by our DevOps strategy for the bank. And we used the engineering community to write that. That wasn't a top-down or an externally written exercise. But we also knew that we had to, or I don't know if we knew, we figured out if you're trying to bring this number of people with you, there really has to be something in it for them, right? And one of the places that we found success there was around IT controls. So in the bank, heavily regulated, as you'd expect, and there's lots of controls that you need to do. And so there was one journey, and it was the first one that we went after. It was just delivering a small software change to production, and that took on average 30 days from raising your ticket to actually deploying it into production. And the main reason it did was because of all the handoffs between the different organizations. And the cyber group who had to do a check in it had to check everybody's homework. And they were a small team, and they were always under budgetary pressure, so they were getting smaller. The number of releases was going up, and it was only going to, it was a disaster waiting to happen. So we went and we examined that, and by leaning the changes, by empowering the engineers to actually do some of these cyber changes or checks themselves, by putting in place a way for that to be independently verified, we were able to satisfy the control owners that they were getting a better outcome, and we were able to satisfy the engineers that they had to take on this extra work. Those 30 days disappeared, first of all, to 30 minutes and now to seconds, right? It did another thing as well. It meant that the development or the engineering community, instead of waiting until the last moment to get their checks done, that shifted left. So because they had access to the tools, because they understood what they needed to do, they were now doing that at a much earlier stage in the life cycle. So as a consequence of that, and the fact that we were able to shrink that time down, and a few other, there was a list of things that the engineering community came up with. We went after the top 3 or 4 of them. And in 2021, we took 35,000 days of effort out of the organization and 7.5 centuries of wait time. So the engineering community, really appreciated that, because nobody likes to be sitting around and wait for something, and nobody likes to go through manual processes. And the C-suite, lapped it up, because you can cash that, you can take that to the bank literally, right? There's huge cost savings there. But if the main victory for it, from my perspective, because it really won the hearts and minds of the engineers, right? And there's a couple of ways that really came true to me. One was we had a internal TV thing where we were doing the or DevOps strategy, and we're launching to tell people what it was and what have you. It's a fairly dry topic, perhaps, and nobody was made to go to it. You had to register and volunteer and turn up, and 11,000 people did, right? And I can only think that they were doing it because they felt there was something in it for them, right? Maybe not just that selfishly, but there was certainly something in it for them. So in order to change and bring a huge group with you, these people are spread across 70 different countries. There's lots of national cultures and differences. I think it was really, really important to appeal to the engineers directly and have centricity around them and their needs. The control owners, just simply, and I was a controller myself, so I can tell this, but the control owners largely had to make up rules, but not worry about how they impacted the engineers on the ground. The engineers on the ground had to do their best to either get it done or avoid them, neither of which were a good outcome. We managed to change that dynamic, and that was hugely important. You can see a much more modest positive jaws at the end of this, because we're dealing with a much larger, greater group of people. But you can see the same impact is happening. Again, from memory, I think we would have been starting around the 60 number as well for the entire population, and that's up to about 200 now, about 3 years later. So, what are our lessons? What are the lessons learned? Transform from within. It's great to get help, to get advice. It's absolutely necessary. We really benefited from that, and I would certainly recommend it. But your team's got to know that they have to do the change themselves. Simple set of metrics. Leadership is key. Unless your leader cares, unless the person who employs you, your manager and their boss, unless they care about it, you're really not going to care about it. It's as simple as that. Controls as products, as I just mentioned, it was a big changing thing. And do the smallest thing is obvious, but often people would come and they say, oh, we can't because we don't have this tool, or we can't because. It's always worth challenging, well, what are you doing? There's lots of things that are within your gift. And if you're not willing to start with continuous improvement yourself, don't wait for somebody else to solve the problem for you. What not so much. Tell smart people what to do. And so what I wasn't able to cover, there was a couple of transformations happened at the same time. It's the third point here as well. And then one of them, they tried to measure everything. And there was 30 or 40 or 50 different metrics. And people were just exhausted from filling in spreadsheets and surveys and all the rest of it. So that was a huge fatigue issue. So we kept it really, really simple. And I think that worked. Beware fake news. Quite similar. People would declare success. All of our people are in pods. We're completely agile. We're 100% DevOps. People are cynical. They see that for what it is. So don't go there. What should you focus on? Strategy. Write it down. It doesn't have to be complicated, but write it down and agree it amongst the group. The visualization of the metrics, super key. They can't be something that gets handed out. They've got to be in front of people. They've got to be using it all the time. Big ambitions, right? If you want to do 10%, I don't think you're going to transform. Not in an environment like we were in. You have to tackle the big things, and you'll only do that if you're ambitious. Customer and engineering centricity. I talked about leadership and stakeholder buy-in. The last thing I'll say in that, you have to persuade lots of different types of stakeholders. There's lots of different ways you can use these metrics and the stories. Don't let disasters go to waste. We found that the IT teams are struggling to persuade their businesses a lot of the time. And so what we did is, as we persuaded one business, we'd get them to go along and have the conversation with the next business over there. So banker to banker was an awful lot more easy for them to consume than IT to banker. Anyway, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think I've dashed through it. It's hard to tell a 10-year story in half an hour. But if you want to catch me later, please come ask any questions. Thank you all so much.